Hey, welcome back. And if you're new here, my name's Christina Kent and I'm an artist based out of San Francisco. Now, recently I became a full-time artist and I get a lot of questions from people asking like, oh, you're a full-time artist, so how do you make your money? And I think it's kind of a funny question because like you don't hear that someone's like a lawyer and you're like, oh, you're a lawyer, so how do you make your money? Or you go to your dentist and it's like, you're a dentist, well, how do you make your money? Like, it seems like a question that's sort of uniquely asked of artists. But then when you start looking into it, it makes a lot of sense because honestly, I feel like artists make money in a huge variety of ways. And maybe that's because it's sort of like it's a passion career, that there's so many artists who are completely devoted to pursuing art professionally. But because of just the nature of the career, because of the competitiveness of it, I don't know what, we find ourselves either having day jobs that support our art practice, or we have other sources of income that help us do art, or we teach, or we do content creation, or we do like all kinds of things that support our art that's not just like selling the art or licensing the art or making money directly off of the creation of artwork. And I think it raises the question of like what it even means to be a full-time artist, which can get us into a whole other discussion. But I can say that like I've met many people who are dedicated to pursuing their art and who are making a living in ways that are really connected to their art through teaching or art licensing or other things, that I kind of take a very expanded definition of what it means to be a full-time artist. And like the people that I've met, I make money from selling my work, but I also make money in other ways, and ways that are related to my art, but not exactly just like selling the work. And so I thought it'd be helpful in this video to kind of break down where my income is coming from and share that with you so that if you're trying to pursue a full-time career in art, you can have an idea of like the way that I'm making it work. And I just want to emphasize, I think there are so many ways to support a creative practice. If you have a day job that helps support you, that you like, that's amazing. If you teach art, if you know, like we all need to find the right way for us to be able to have a thriving creative practice. And that's going to look different for me compared to what it looks like for you. I also have to mention that I just started doing art full-time this year, so this video is probably super premature, but I've been getting this question from people, and I've been selling my work now for several years and kind of building my art business for several years. So I'm going to be talking about kind of my revenue sources now that I'm doing art full-time, but also connect that with how I've been making revenue in the past and how things looked in the past, because over time I have learned things about different revenue sources and sort of like the business cycles and fluctuations in my art sales. And I'm gonna say up front, I'm not gonna share specific numbers. That just feels really personal. But also, I live in a very expensive part of the United States. I live in San Francisco, and a lot of the numbers will probably sound just like ridiculous to people living in other places. So I think it's more relevant to kind of get the income breakdown rather than the absolute numbers. I will say that since I've gone full-time, I've been able to support myself from the revenue sources I'll be talking about, and also have extra to save. So and this is kind of what I expected, since I have been gradually building up my business over time. So if you are thinking about, going and doing art full time, I make sure to try to test out the different revenue sources to make sure that like you have a market for your work or for your teaching or whatever you're thinking of doing for your business before you go full time. And besides living in a really expensive place, I keep my expenses relatively low. I split rent on an apartment with my partner. I don't have kids. I don't have a family I need to take care of. I don't have debt. So that helps me keep my expenses relatively low. And if you want to hear more about my decision to pursue art full time, I have a video on that as well, so be sure to check that out. So now let's talk about my income breakdown in my first quarter as a full-time artist. So in this quarter, the vast amount of my revenue came from original paintings, either through commission sales or through just selling original work. You can see about 75% of my sales are from painting, which is these original paintings. These are things that I wasn't told to paint, but I just paint them myself. I either put them on my website or in a gallery, and then they sell through that. And a big factor here was that I had my solo show in January of this year, so I was able to sell a lot of paintings through my solo show, and that was a big driver of my sales. The second biggest category among my paintings was commissions, so I had a few large commissions with some clients, and that was also a big driver of my sales in the first quarter. And then you can see my other revenue sources, content creation, print sales, and teaching are all relatively small. But I still find it really helpful to have those revenue sources because I've noticed that they seem to be not exactly correlated to the art sales. Because one of the things that I've noticed with art sales is that they tend to be really unstable over time. There's just huge month-to-month fluctuations in my art sales. And like as a business, as a self-employed person, that can be really hard to manage those big income changes. So that's why I think it's really nice to have some other revenue source like making revenue from content creation or through selling prints of your artwork or through teaching. Like all of these things can be a good way to support your art. So far, these revenue sources are pretty small for me, but I'm looking into trying to grow them, like through growing my YouTube channel, through getting sponsors on YouTube, because they are this sort of consistent form of income that is not connected to my paintings. Because one thing that I wonder is, well, you know, if I'm making all of my money from doing these paintings, what happens if I can't get a show? Or what happens if I get sick? Or for some other reason I can't paint for a while? It is a lot of pressure to put on my creativity to just make my income from my art sales. And so that's why I'm trying to build some of these other revenue streams. That being said, I think there are some people who really don't mind the pressure. There are some people who make a ton of sales around the holidays, and then they're able to budget effectively throughout the year so that, you know, they're able to make ends meet during the year. But for me, it just feels really risky to put all of that weight and all of that hope on holiday sales. So I'm trying to find other ways to keep making revenue during the year. And like I said, I switched to doing full-time art this year, but I have been selling my art for several years now. And so we can compare my revenue this year to the revenue that I was making when this was kind of just my side hustle. And so when we look at my revenue from last year, when I wasn't doing art full time, but was doing it on the side, we can see that the income breakdown is still based mostly on art sales. So painting is still the biggest category, like my original paintings, but commissions was actually a bigger category. I got a really big commission at the end of last year that was just a huge boost to my income. So last year, commissions were a big part of my art income. You can also see that teaching was also a bigger source of revenue. I taught a painting workshop, and I actually taught a couple painting workshops last year, and so I made a substantial income from those. I also had more print sales. I was kind of pushing print sales a bit more last year, but ultimately I feel like print sales haven't been that big of a revenue driver for me, so I'm not focusing on those as much anymore, or at least for now. And then content creation was pretty small, like my YouTube wasn't monetized, so I wasn't getting very much from that. And for a bit more insight on my painting sales, I sold about 40 paintings in the first quarter of 2024, so that's quite a lot of paintings to sell, and that's how I'm able to get a lot of revenue from my work. And also I was in I had my solo show and was also in 3 group exhibitions too. So in addition to posting my work on my website, I also had these in-person events where I could sell my work. So that's my income breakdown for the first quarter of 2024. I expect to look at it later in the year, and probably we're gonna see the income breakdown change a bit. I think we'll see an increase in the amount I'm getting from content creation. Probably during the summer when painting sales tend to slow down, I might see a decrease in revenue from the paintings, which will probably pick up again in like around the holidays when I usually see a rise in sales. And I also expect this breakdown to change a lot over the course of my art career. From what I've heard, artists will maybe have one year where they're selling a lot of original work, and then they go into prints, and then maybe they're getting grants for public art or they're teaching. So I think that I'm kind of just trying to keep an open mind about ways that I can sustain my art business, and you know, not. And try to do it in the least risky way that allows me to spend most of my time painting in the studio. So yeah, those are my sources of revenue as an artist right now. Like I said, it's only been 1 quarter of doing art full time, so I'm excited to see how things change over the months and years to come. I hope you liked this video and you found it helpful, and it just gave you some insight on how I as an artist am making it work. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave those in the comments below. As always, a huge shout out to my supporters on Patreon. Patreon is a great way to help me get a more stable income from my work and kind of weather these fluctuations of art sales. So thank you guys so much for supporting these videos and making them happen. If you like my art, if you like my videos, and you want to help me make more, check out my Patreon at the link. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.